It's Friday, as always,
Yeah,
uh, the 4th of July. So happy birthday,
why not?
USA. Yeah.
Independence Day from unfair taxation without
Well, I really
representation.
didn't want to call it Independence Day because I'm not really feeling like that's a theme in what's going on right now. But what do I
Right.
know? I'm Canadian.
I really feel like the way through is to hold on to those ideals. And so I'm gonna say it, independence, everyone's created equal, and we'll stick to it at least during this part of the show. And y'all had Canada Day, was it last Wednesday? Or I'm so sorry
July
because I'm
1st.
American.
Yeah, we're 3 days before you.
There you go. I think that's great. I
Yeah,
think that's great.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
what are we talking about today, Lillian?
Well, last week we talked about the moon through the houses, and it just brought up what are the phases all about. And so today we're going to talk about the moon through the phases.
Okay. So should we maybe start with what a phase is?
Yeah,
Because it's not I still haven't explored the wealth of phase because you can do phases with the planets as
right.
well to the
Exactly.
sun. So it's the
That's exactly.
relationship between one body and the sun,
That's right.
right? And we should actually, on that note, we should talk to Tara Howell because that's what her book is about, and maybe she'll come
Oh,
on
I
and
would love that.
with us about. I know, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
But so the moon phases are determined. When you talk about phase, you're always measuring it from the fastest planet in relation to the other one. And so the moon, of course, is faster than the sun. And so we're measuring as it leaves the sun's conjunction and as it comes back, right? So the
Yep.
360 degrees through the zodiac that the moon does. Yeah. And then there's
That's right.
eight of them. Eight,
That's right.
eight. Um, and so we have the new moon is from 0 degrees. They're all 45 degrees in size, I guess is the best way to put that. So the new moon is going to start at 0 degrees and go to 45 degrees. Then we've got crescent up until 90 degrees, first quarter from 90 to 135. Gibbous,
Mm-hmm. I
yep,
like Gibbons. Yep.
yeah, gibbous. And that's 135 to 180. Full, of course, is the opposition, 180
That's
to
right.
230 or 225. Yeah. And then disseminating or waning gibbous. But I
Right.
really like, I mean, for some people, adding the waxing and the waning helps them orient where the moon is compared to the sun. Whereas I like the word disseminating because it does
It
describe
tells
what
a
that
story.
phase does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the last quarter, which is 260 to no 270 to 315, and then our balsamic phase, which is also described as the waning crescent, I believe.
Is it?
I
Hmm.
think I've
Yes, that
seen it
sounds
in
right.
books. Yeah,
That sounds
waning
right.
crescent. But I love balsamic. I love
Yeah.
what that says. I mean,
So
it
do
gives
I.
us information about it. So 315 to 360 degrees is
Yeah.
the balsamic phase. Yeah. Yeah. And then so should we talk about what made me obsessed about this?
I would love to hear what got you into it.
So it actually started when I met Kelly Surtees. And
Mm.
in culminating, meeting her and see she's got buoyant energy and there's a light in her and an enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
If anybody who knows or follows Kelly, there's a
Yeah.
really lovely energy there. And as I learned more about her chart, I realized that she's a new moon. Sorry, Kelly, hope that's okay. And then I met somebody who had very similar configuration, ascendant, sun and moon, all very similar, but was born a balsamic moon.
Hmm.
That person's energy was very, um, it was slower, it was darker, it could tend maybe to pessimism a little bit.
Hmm.
There was just a very different energy there. And I thought, well, that's so interesting because I mean, I tend towards the more empathic side of energy. And so they felt very different to me, is what it
Hmm.
comes down to. And I realized that it was the phase of the moon that was the really distinct differentiation between them. and they both actually had that energy sitting around the first house. So it's the thing you see. So it's
Yeah.
even that it's more prevalent, right? Because it's sitting in that first house. And I just thought, God, so what is happening? What kind of influence does the energy of the phase have on the expression of the sun and the moon?
Mm-hmm.
And what else can we tell about a person based on the phase of the moon?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it began. Um, and so then there were other little things that happened, like anybody I met who had a bunch of air in the chart, especially if a ruling planet or the moon or the sun, whatever, there's strong air energy. I wondered if they held their breath because I know I've got a stellium in Libra, and I tend to, when I'm not thinking or I'm stressed or whatever, I tend to hold my breath. Then I thought, based on whether the moon is waxing, which is an increase of energy, or whether
Yeah.
it was waning,
Yeah.
are they holding, are they letting it out and holding it, or are they holding it as they breathe in? And every single time they, yes, held their breath,
Hmm.
and waxing people held in, waning people held
Oh,
out, which
wow.
is me. I like like that
Yeah.
because I've forgotten to
Yeah.
breathe, right?
Yeah.
And to bring it in. And I
Yeah.
just thought, wow, like that seems like, first of all, the fact that it was like every time, you
Mm-hmm.
don't often find that. Um, and the presence of that waxing versus the waning energy, I was like, I gotta know more about this. And so I
Yeah.
became quite obsessed with moon phases. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you, when you're working with moon phases, where do you go in terms of
Well,
like, how do you
for
like to
me,
work with them?
it's pretty integral, like finding out where the moon phase is, because again, it's where your secure, how your secure, your desire for security will be activated. And so I'm a first quarter moon phase. No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm always try
We're
that.
both fulls, lady.
I know. I always try that. I want to be. I can't choose my chart for goodness sake. Anyway, I'm full phase. And as you well know, the features of the full phase include kind of a roller coaster because it includes all of the component parts of the phases in the way that balsamic does as well, but it's in the most active part of the chart, and so meaning it's at the culmination, right? It has come to fruition versus balsamic, which I think of as it's the barren ground in winter, and we're going to let it rest before the next growing season starts. So it's full, which could lead to a sense of impatience, but it's quiet. Whereas the full is a roller coaster. You can advise, or I often advise my clients with full moons that there isn't a linear gauge to success because you will experience many things, and that's just the moon doing its thing. It's not you deterring from your good path or a good way. So I'm skipping ahead to an example, but I want to see what is going to kick off that moon. If they're in a protective phase, which I think of as the crescent phase. I think I was sharing with you before we got on that I love to think of the growing cycle with the moon phase. And so the new phase, ironically, is dark. We think of the new phase as like, thank goodness the light has come back, some of us. But for the first 2 days, it's dark before it gathers any matter. And so there's this, faith that you have to have that you're making plans. And, I think of the Fool card and that way of making decisions where you're being hopefully guided. And then the second house I think of as the tiny little seeds poking through. And if you've ever grown seedlings in the winter, you have to harden them off with like a little bit of time out in the weather and a little bit of time protected. And you want to make sure that they're protected from bugs and other things. And so I think about that, that there's a sense of that protection. And it is primarily the second house. So I wouldn't conflate the two, but there is a sense of protection. And then there could be, if there's an activated second house, you're protecting your stuff kind of thing. But I wouldn't generally conflate them. So as we move along, the next, being the first quarter, is experiments. And that one is often a shocker because experiments mean you're not looking again for a linear win. You are testing something and it fails, testing something and it fails. And can you see why I want to be that one? Because it kind of feels really natural. So you don't grade yourself on what has failed. You grade yourself on how well you're setting up your laboratory and what you're doing with the information once you're aware of it, kind of thing. I know I'm using a lot of different words when it's about emotional security, but I like to find what that motivation is and then weave it through the chart that the clients have. So anyway, um, Gibbous, I know you and I have gone back and forth on this. I learned in evolutionary astrology that since it's, you know, after this experiment, that there could be a real resentment. There can be a stopping of success. And in talking with you and in doing this show, I have a very different sense of it where you've kind of gathered your energy and you're pushing into full. And so there's a opportunity with Gibbous that I hadn't seen before. So I appreciate that. I talked about full disseminating is like, I have a little bit of a funny story with that one because I heard this joke that I have to share. So disseminating is when the flowers have arrived and they're letting their seeds go. And so they're spreading their seeds far and wide. And you know that vision of a dandelion that you blow on it? I saw something where this woman said she's going to change how she makes her wishes because she doesn't want to blow on a dandelion head to help it ejaculate seeds. But she asked a scientist what it actually does. And the scientist went, no, no, it's way more like shooting babies out of a t-shirt cannon. And that's how she's going to make wishes. And that's how I'm going to think about disseminating. Pew, pew, pew. And then last quarter, there's like a sense of the next cycle that will begin. So there can be a sense of loss. And I loved how you described balsamic because, you know, if you do this with Venus and Mars, for example, and find their relationship, and you have a balsamic Venus and Mars, there may be resonance with what I'm about to say, which is you kind of been there and done that. And so it takes something special and attuned to gauge your interest, but that could leave you in a place where you're feeling sorrowful or left out, or there's not always the context that comes with that. But the idea is to let things rest and observe what comes up. And so so that's the whole cycle, and that's how I would talk to folks about it. And then the way that I got into it was just I have the moon in Cancer and it's all up in my business. And one of the things about the moon, being the fastest thing that we observe is that it is the most changeable. And I think it's the best example of if we're not moving, we're dead. And so it can come as a surprise to folks with a more fixed chart that things are moving all the time. And there's an opportunity to roll with that, just like there is in cementing a clean way.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like the if we break it down into its four components, like
Mm-hmm.
the dark moon, the light moon, the waxing moon, waning moon, because they all make some combination
I
of
love
that.
that.
Um, so I before I even get there, I want to say I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm very strict about the moon phases being they start at the degree that they start
Oh,
at.
yeah.
And it's very, very important to me when you're talking new and full specifically, because they're not specifically, but more so because, if you look at, there's a president of a country that's having a birthday today
Mm-hmm.
and born with like within minutes of the full, but sitting on
Wow.
the gibbous side.
Wow.
And one of the things that I've noticed and read about and seen over and over again is that the waxing moon tends to look forward. It's not it's going towards, that energy is very literal. and the waning is going to look back and have the potential to look back. And as we talk about the full moon, I know I think it's Demetra George who says that that's the, and probably other people too, but I think that's where I read it, was that the full moon is objective, or has the potential, because the moon and the
Yeah, I
sun are
would
sitting
say
across
so.
from each other, and of course as soon as you shine that light you can see better.
Yeah,
But there's definitely more inclination with a waning moon to consult its history to make decisions, right?
I
and
like that.
and we don't see, like, that particular chart is an example of where we don't see any indication of looking at past history to make future decisions.
Hmm.
um and the same with at the bottom with the balsamic versus the new. Like, I'm telling you, that energetic shift is really huge. And
Oh,
I
I
actually have a
agree.
cute story. I was teaching this to non-astrologers on a retreat.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, you get a chart where you think, oh, birth time, we're not even talking about anything that is necessarily going to be birth time contingent.
Right.
And yet, this person said that they were born between an hour and like within an hour, right? Well, the moon phase shifted. It went into new moon in that hour. And I thought, and I was giving everybody a little description of their moon phase and their chart. I got their birth data and everything. Um, and I'm like, well, I'll just wait. I'll print out both new and balsamic for her, and I'll know, right? When I meet her, or maybe not, maybe just give her both and let her decide, right? I
Oh,
was just going to stay fluid and
yeah.
just see how it went. And so everybody came in, they were settling, and this person came in dragging feet, kind of shoulders down, energy quite low. And she came up and introduced herself. She goes, yeah, I'm peopled out. Can I just have my stuff? I'm going to go back to the caravan. Okay, so here's the balsamic
Yeah,
information.
exactly.
There was absolutely nothing, because the new moon is going to want to come in and experience the new information, and of course generalizing here, but everything about this woman was very, there was a depth, there was a seriousness, there was yeah, I was like, definitely a balsam. So it's like it that's a perfect example of how that energy shifts dramatically
Yeah,
when the waning versus waxing kicks in. So I
exactly.
I know I met a fellow astrologer who had been saying he was a full moon the whole time, and he was 1.5 1 degree and 30 minutes, something like that. I'm like, baby,
It's not
you
happening.
are a gibbous moon, my friend. Because the light is there. You don't
Right.
need to go for the light. It's there. It's part of that particular moon phase, right?
Yeah, this is foundational patterning. It's what's
Hmm.
built in. There's nothing to change or fix, but the joy of
Yeah.
finding the resonance of what will feel like the opening up of your phase is worth investigating. And
Yeah,
I'm not just
absolutely.
saying that because I'm full mooned.
Well, and what's fascinating, because I've written an article and I've lectured on phases several
Right.
times, and so I'm always going in and looking at new examples and finding new charts and patterns and things. And the thing that's so interesting is that I remember actually just sitting on the couch one day, and I think it was Allison Janney,
Mm,
and
love her.
ah, is she in a relationship? Like, I don't know. It just something made me think about that. And then started thinking about all of the celebrities who are either like famously single, or we just never hear about their relationships,
Right.
or they've had several, right?
Yeah.
Like that's part of their story. And they were almost always gibbous. Every
Mm,
single person I thought of was a gibbous, even in my personal life they
wow.
were gibbous moods. I thought, I don't know why. And
That's
other than
interesting.
maybe there's just too much of a mission in this life, and relationship isn't necessarily the most important thing. I'm
Well, I
not
would
sure,
definitely.
but it was just an interesting pattern.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, when I think about the moon phase, I overlay it with the houses, meaning just because they're both circles, I don't necessarily create a link between the houses and the development that comes from the cycle of phases, but I just was curious about that.
I don't. That's an interesting way to look at it. I'll have to
right?
take a look at it. I tend to lean more towards incorporating some of the aspect,
Right.
like that's one of the techniques that Demetra uses, right? Like
Yes.
whatever the phase starts at is the
Yeah.
aspect influence, right? So
Yes.
the opposition for the full moon, the conjunction for the new moon, and so
Right.
forth.
And so
So of
on. Yeah.
course the gibbous and the disseminating um are born from the quincunx, the
Right. Which is
150
not
degree.
easy surfing, right? We were just talking about this, that you have to find a way.
And there's
And
always the adjustment, so
yes.
the path isn't necessarily straight for somebody who's born in that phase.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's interesting is you and I both actually have that aspect between our sun
Right.
and moon, but
Exactly.
we're born in a full moon. We actually haven't
Exactly.
hit the
Yeah.
disseminating
Yeah.
phase yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
sweating our way towards it.
So here's an interesting pattern that I noticed with full moon people
hmm
is that because so when you get, do you have solar fire? I don't know what software
Oh
you use,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, in solar fire it comes with a whole bunch of charts of people, famous people.
hmm
And so when I decided just to pull a list of full mooners,
Yeah.
and almost anybody that you can think of that got forced into the spotlight as a kid,
Mm,
full moon.
that makes sense.
Michael Jackson,
Wow.
um, Fisher, Carrie Fisher,
Yeah.
um, Chastity Bono, not Chastity anymore. Sorry, I'm
Chaz.
sorry, I don't
That's
remember
okay.
their name.
Chaz.
Yeah. And yeah, so like all of these people who were just sort of forced into the limelight against
Wow.
their will, full moons. I think actually one of Michael Jackson's kids, Paris, I think she also. So
Interesting.
it's really fascinating that there was like the list was huge, and there's a good chunk of them that had been forced into the limelight for some reason, which is a very full moon thing.
Right, right. So maybe we can put some signs to the sun and the moon and look at this.
Okay.
I don't know if you pulled any charts. I haven't. So let me just see if I can get one
Well,
now.
and I like that. Thank you for bringing that up because I'll just give an example
Please.
of
Yeah.
like, so meeting somebody who is a strong Aries personality, right? And so let's stick with the same sun and moon, right?
Yeah.
Well, a double Aries in a new moon phase is
Whew.
extremely different. I mean, that is some super Aries energy. That is some like go, 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 go. Let's
Absolutely.
try all the things, you know?
Yes, I
Um,
agree.
yeah. And then, but do you know any double Aries balsamics?
I do not.
So that I can think of one, but I feel like there's a second one. Anyways, like absolute Buddha, like,
Wow.
wise, calm, and just like absolutely different energy, 100% than what you would just would not assume that it's double Aries,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so that balsamic is looking backwards. So it actually really grounds the Aries energy. And because Aries tends to being like such Mars fire,
Ah,
it's go, it's forward, it's let's
yeah.
do this, so that's enhanced in the new moon
Right.
and calmed and given a bit of perspective in the
Right.
balsamic moon.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that quite a bit because you're touching on one of the things with a new phase in general. I'm thinking of this because of Aries. Forgive me, anyone with Aries. Boredom, right? Aries or Gemini, I very much associate with that need for new stimuli, that need for new information that is not necessarily pathological or a problem. It's nothing to fix or change. And so you simply understand that that's how you are and you go look for that new information. And then when it hits crescent, one of the things that laying it over the natural chart helps with is it's an inward process that you're not going to get validation for. The crescent phase is one that you're refining for your own self. And so there isn't kind of a ticker tape parade. There isn't, it's your own personal business. And so the development can be very tiny or a refinement or something. And the sextile, no, sextile is not what kicks that one off. Uh, yeah, it's
It's semi-sextile.
right,
Yeah.
semi-sextile.
Yeah.
It's littler, right? And then I think I don't know that anyone has assigned the yin yang. I apologize for not knowing that in advance of the phases, but to me, it does sort of feel like, in addition to what we're talking about, these different waves and overlays of information, that even a new phase that's not looking back will have some benefits because it goes out and does, and that the crescent phase will pull in and look for what is important to oneself. And then the first quarter will experiment with that. And so first quarter phases, are you familiar with those? I think I have a Mars Venus first quarter phase. No, it's a crescent. I want a first quarter phase I want to
That's
be a
so
Libra
interesting
with a
because
first
like
quarter phase.
the one of the hallmarks of a first quarter phase, in my opinion, is that need for conflict, because it's through the
Yeah,
conflict that growth comes, you know? And the
right.
danger with, especially when we're talking about the sun and the moon with first quarter, is the creation of conflict.
Right.
Once life should become patterns that people have learned to sort out how to navigate life, have established, the conflicts could calm down. But often we'll see people, if trauma isn't dealt with, if things aren't dealt with, that this constant creation of conflict keeps happening just because it's a place where people get comfortable, it's
It's
like I
familiar. It
yeah,
becomes
absolutely.
familiar, but
Yeah,
not helpful.
100%.
Now, see, I find that
Absolutely.
amazing because that makes me think of the 12th house and how karmic
Hmm.
things kind of erupt. But you can also go looking, and what you find is like super weird and will take you on a journey. And then take it back to that first quarter and how I was saying it before. If you take it back to the plant phase, they're all hardened, they're all seedlings. You kind of have them in a row and you're watching them, but you're not watching them all the time. And so someone like me, for example, can come out and pull out a little carrot wanting to see how it's done. And they only have one taproot and then it dies. So like, oops, I experimented and it went wrong. So the understanding conflict, right? I mean, I think that that's part of the understanding that we're always moving or we're dead. People think they stay the same. It's just not true. And so understanding that, my understanding of conflict is there are two different opinions or there are two different experiences and they're not gelling. And so adjustment needs to be made, but there might be intensity. It might be hot and humid outside. You might not have eaten. There are conditions that may have occurred. And so you may express or do things in a way that is arrhythmic, not aligned, conflict. And that the goal of that is to not go after the thing or the experience that you feel is perhaps causing the conflict or the source of the conflict, but to go inside and digest whatever it is that you're fighting on the inside that's having it show up at all outside. It's to resolve. Conflict is to resolve, not to live in or amongst, not to leave as a legacy. It is there because you're looking for information that you haven't gleaned from inside. And that's a hard lesson to learn because, first of all, I still blame other people if I get into an argument with them. And I asked a friend of mine if I talk shit, and my genuine, honest friend said, yes, I do talk shit. So I can't deny that anymore either. But my point being, my argument I have learned over the many years is never with someone else. It's an opportunistic slapping on of whatever conflict is inside of me. So these days, I'm just going to take care of it on the inside. And so, in a way, I feel like first quarter, maybe this is why I want it so much, can become the best at that kind of negotiation and springboard from it and do cool things with it. But yeah, the conflict is not there to make people suffer or be a curse or anything like that. So,
And when we're talking about phases in the first quarter, that this, and if we stick with Demetra's description of the phases, the point of the first quarter is just build the structures of that square, right?
yeah,
And so there should be some kind of building happening. Whereas I actually think that the crescent phase is actually the one that can, because so the most what's the word that I want? Fragile,
yes,
right? If we think of the seedling, so most fragile and yet resilient
yes,
of the phases. And so I think that even like just waxing in general can get into a loop of just going to keep moving forward, just going to keep moving forward, that can turn into a Groundhog Day,
yes,
because it might feel like it's forward motion, but if nothing's changing, it's really not. It's just a
yeah,
circle of life, right?
yeah,
And with that crescent phase, that there can be this the resilient, they might feel like the resilience comes from the conflict that they inject themselves
interesting.
into, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's a survival thing as opposed to a structure building thing in the first quarter.
Okay, I like that. I
And
like
so
that.
maybe this is totally a guess, or I don't know, educated guess, but perhaps the crescent phase might get into that loop because it's feeling like the action is the thing that is important. So say you've got somebody, especially if there's a lot of cardinal energy in the chart,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
mix that with the crescent need for like survival, and if trauma hasn't been dealt with, that could absolutely turn into some form of loop
I
that could
agree.
be
I agree.
problematic.
And just, and, not to skip over it, but the new phase could be as pathologically seeking new stimuli as anything if trauma's not dealt with. I mean, um, there's a real grounded approach to finding yourself, and it's always through your own self versus other people. And I think that is reflected in all of these. I just like the idea. Oh God, I just love the first quarter. I like the idea of like throwing away paper cups and setting things on fire and working with dangerous chemicals. I want a lab. Tracy, that might be it. I want a lab. Something like that.
Funny. And
I
for
like
me,
I like
because
that clarification because I think in the doing of the first quarter there may be less of that need. It'll be more
yeah,
you're meeting obstacles. And the
right.
same with Gibbous, because that 80-20% of working with projects is in effect. 80% of the project is easy. That last 20%, it'll test you every time. And so
Yeah.
I wonder if Gibbous isn't sort of reflective of that.
I love that. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's true. Well, and I think that, the dark phases, one of the lessons and important things of the dark phases is to get in touch with your intuition, because that's probably the dark phases biggest gift, is
Yes.
their intuition, right? Whereas on the other side, the bright phases need to learn to work with the objectivity
Yes.
and how to see things from an objective point of view. And those squares and anything in between needs to figure out the balance of the two things, right?
Oh, I find that fascinating. So, objectivity, let's talk about that for just a little bit. I really like that.
I feel like
So,
you're picking
that's,
on us.
I
Sorry, go ahead.
just want to try something.
Okay, I'm in.
So, yeah, I was just going to say, so as a person with maximum subjectivity, I struggle getting perspective. And so I try many, many things in order to achieve a neutral, direct perspective. And the main one for objectivity is other people's reactions, reflections. And the other one is what comes up inside of me if that happens. Otherwise, I remind myself all the time that I am not objective and that if I want perspective, I actually will have to apply myself to find it. In some cases, I feel like that's fine. I do think being, my politics, for example, I'm fine with how passionate I am about them. In fact, That used to be a joke at Microsoft at review time, is if you were a scrapper, you'd say, I'm really passionate about my work. And that would mean I'm kind of an asshole, really. But moving on, that sense of objectivity. So, the newness of things that precludes any knowledge, it precludes any objectivity, right? You're automatically in a space where there isn't anything familiar. And then, yeah, I like that, moving towards full, where there's full illumination, uh, becomes the place where we can see it. I sometimes call that just being blindsided versus objectivity. Finding things out 20 years too late, that kind of thing.
It's interesting because one of the things that I've been like not on purpose, it's just sort of happening that I'm getting so fascinated with charts where there's this important lesson, and yet the chart has been designed with this huge obstacle that is like
Right.
the opposite of that
Mm-hmm.
versus people. So, what made me think of that right now is that so I'm born in a full moon, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also born with a giant Libra Aries opposition of other
Right.
planets,
Right.
which is right. And so, not that I came out objective, that's a total lie,
Right.
but
Right.
I do have the skills built in
Right.
to jump there a bit more easily than somebody who was not delivered that kind of a chart.
Yeah.
It's still a struggle and it's still really hard work, but it sometimes you're given an easier time doing that than other people might be.
Right. Right.
I don't even know what that meant. So
Well, I would say in a spreadsheet, I'm a demon in a spreadsheet. I'm completely objective. And if I need to look up percentages or logarithms or something to prove a fact, that's where you get the objectivity from.
right. Well, and to be fair to myself, I am like my go-to is, so how are they feeling about this?
Nice.
To try to understand perspective. And really, the only time I get obsessed is when I can't figure it out, when I'm just like, I really cannot see the other person's perspective on
Right.
what an action or something that's happened. That
Yeah.
is really when I'm at a loss because I am pretty good at putting myself in somebody else's shoes. It does not dampen down my opinions, but
I know what you mean.
yeah,
And I am not good at putting myself in anyone else's shoes at all, but I'm good at staying out of their business. And so if there's a way they can work with me as a cipher for a more emotional perspective, that's generally where we go. Or not emotional, there's a different thing going on there. But it's funny because, as a moon person, my experience of all of this is kinesthetic, or in someone's energy field. And so there are no words. When we talk about conflict, I think about pre-verbal issues where you don't see the issue, you see the things protecting the issue, which may be dysfunctional or unhealthy. And so there's something that's being protected. Um, so sensing into that, if folks are not that way inclined, I land on a very dry beach like a little octopus and just kind of move my tentacles around helplessly until I go, and now we're done.
I love that. That's lovely. I mean, you have such a gift for empathy, and your intuition is so strong that you were given just a different set of gifts to manage it,
I agree.
you
I
know?
agree.
Yeah.
And knowing that, I tried to describe this once to my in-laws, that if you pull an octopus out of the water, they're no longer graceful. They look kind of, like a gummy, and they can't execute their plans. And I think we were supposed to answer, why is Jupiter um, exalted in Cancer? And I looked it up, and the
Oh, good.
sense of the benefits, I'm kind of cribbing a little language from Andy, is that they can fulfill their promise. So the exaltations and the rulerships and the dignities are to show you which planet and sign combinations are perfectly set up to align with the promise of the planet. And so
Ooh,
Jupiter is in that alignment with Cancer.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you
I
for
get a
doing
real
that.
Ganesh vibe with it. with
Mm-hmm.
the rat underneath, because they also identify poverty within that. And so I think of that as a Cancer generosity, is one that acknowledges that some people have less, or maybe injured, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So the obstacles may be the things that protected you for many, many years. They may be the things that are just functionally. I mean, I think about this a lot with astrology, the phases, like any other aspects or descriptions. These are tools that we've removed from subjective positions to realign so that they function in a way where you can accomplish your goals and you can live out your promise. And if you talk about the few things you've said about your chart, a full moon with a Libra Aries stellium, yum yum yum, give it to me. I love that. I love that. I am so sorry, but I love the struggle of Libra and Aries people trying to figure out when to lay the hammer down and how to be graceful without losing your edge. I think of like pinstripe suits. I think of, the mafia, right? I think of the things that are polished, but also reveal intensity and depth. So to me, that's a really fun one.
That's so much more graceful than I just think of it as I learned to do the verbal moonwalk very early.
I
Ba ba
love that.
bum, walk it back. Bum, walk it back.
Well, my opposition is Pisces and Virgo, most famously executed by our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and not by anyone else, and not by anyone else. And so that desire to be the ultimate sacrifice, and also be a strategic warrior, in my case, is a very bizarre combination. And I love when I can support it. Anyway, we've drifted a bit. I
Well, what I
apologize.
was thinking for, oh, hey, Jonathan. Jonathan has joined us. That's great. And
Welcome.
oh gosh, I hope he heard your description of Jupiter and Cancer. Lillian
Yes, we
answered
just discussed.
your Jupiter and Cancer exaltation question, Jonathan. So you'll have to go back and watch the recording if you didn't catch it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what I'd like to do is maybe talk about what each phase can contribute to, what we talk about with the moon sign. So like let's say which sign would
Yes.
you say would have the most stark shift if based on whether it was a new moon or a different moon sign? Does that make sense?
Totally. Leo.
Okay, cool.
I don't want to take too long. Leo,
Ooh,
don't you
okay.
think?
No.
Oh,
I'll but
wow.
I'll tell you what I think when you're done.
Okay, hold on, hold on. So I think Leo because I love the notion of a first house Leo moon. I just would love to walk behind them while they buy gorgeous clothing and you know, glow and give generously. Um, and then I want to run out of the way when they are in a bad mood of any kind whatsoever. And that's all first house stuff. And then I don't think I'd ever meet a Leo in the 12th house, a Leo moon in the 12th house, because I think that they would, you know, be like the decorator crab, where they
Hmm,
would have so many clingy bits that are designed to disguise that they would only work with folks they wanted to work with. Okay,
right.
your turn.
Hmm. Well, I think that because the new moon energy is so go move forward and new experiences, that overall it's going to have the biggest impact on a fixed sign, right? Because just naturally, all the fixed signs, so Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio, that forward motion is not always going to be their first go-to. So the new moon is really going to shift that. The born in the new moon phase, I should make the whole sentence happen. But so now if I distill that down, for me, it's Taurus. And that actually is from experience and meeting somebody who had a very strong, so it was a Taurus moon in the first house and um trying to think if it was an Aries sun. Nope, I think it was a Taurus sun, Taurus moon. And that person, so I actually was doing a talk on the signs and talking about the fixity of a Taurus moon and how it does not like change at
Yes.
all, right? Like from a fundamental, that's a scary thing. And the one of the organizers pulled me aside because that doesn't resonate for me at all. And I'm a Taurus moon, Taurus sun. I hadn't started working with the phases yet, but
Right.
man, do I go back to that conversation now. She's like, we move constantly about every 2.5 years. My husband and I uproot and move and live in a new place. And I was baffled, right? Because I'm like, huh, well, I guess
Right.
I'd have to look at the rest of your chart is where I ended up. But I
Of course.
realized in hindsight and doing this work that she was born in a new moon. And yeah,
I like that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it really dramatically shifted how I would interpret that Taurus moon.
Right. Right.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go to let so crescent. I mean, what
Sure.
which I to me, I'm just gonna say Taurus, it would be similar because the crescent energy still got that forward motion in it,
Yeah,
needing
I
to
agree. I agree.
experience
I
life.
kind of like that. I mean, I like the Taurus with the crescent, because
Yeah.
there's the same sort of sense of protection, you know.
Yeah, I feel like the maybe the need for moving forward is a little less frenetic. It's a little less in the
Right.
crescent phase. And
Right. It's sort of evaluating, maybe they would
mhm,
get two of something,
right, right,
or two
right,
different types of things.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Fascinating. That's fascinating.
So an
And then
opening square, I just want to jump in right away because I already know
please,
that one. And that to me is Libra.
fascinating.
Because Libra doesn't love conflict, if by
Right.
definition, right? It's diplomatic. And that opening square is about creating some kind of discomfort and conflict to be able to build its
That's so
empire, right?
interesting. Yeah.
So often I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever we talk about Libra, in a general setting in a party or whatever, it's like, well, I'm a Libra and I don't mind conflict. Like there's always one in the group or somebody
Sure.
who has a friend every time. And my first thought is always, oh, I wonder if they're a first quarter or a last quarter, right? First
Right.
quarter first, maybe last quarter.
Right.
Um, and so because the first quarter that needs that conflict in Libra, well, here's the thing. The We've talked about this before, but
Yeah.
that homeostasis thing about Libra. So
Yeah.
if Libra is born in conflict and that's where it's safe and comfortable, then it's going to perpetuate that. And so when you combine that energy with the first
Yeah.
quarter, you there's the potential for somebody who creates a lot of conflict just to keep that as the
Yeah.
norm because that's where they feel comfortable.
If I could choose somebody for that first quarter phase, or choose a sign, I would choose Capricorn for that first quarter sign,
Oh,
phase
interesting.
rather, uh or Capricorn. Yeah, moon in Capricorn.
Hmm.
Because I love the idea of the constant exploration, or the looking for what's beyond the obstacle. And I feel like Capricorn could find that, if that makes sense, that they'd be
Oh yeah,
motivated.
I to me
Yeah.
the Capricorn is the most affiliated to that first quarter.
That's what I'm
And
saying. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. I totally
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Um Also, but when we're talking about like shifting the energy of a sign, I
Sure.
would also say Pisces would be quite different if we had the first quarter.
Ooh,
Um,
let's talk about that. So the
just because
Pisces
of
moon.
now with Libra, it was about the diplomacy and the not liking conflict. With Pisces, it's the structure piece, where
Right.
Pisces' natural inclination is not about building structures,
Right.
right? And so that is where the first quarter is going to potentially alter the energy big time of a Pisces moon. Jonathan is
Interesting.
saying, I was born in the first quarter and I'm a Capricorn rising. Jonathan, what is your moon sign? I'd be curious to know with the first quarter moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say Pisces and Libra would be my two that change most.
The
And
two
then
that change first. I like that. I like that.
yeah. And so what
Yeah.
about for you for Gibbous? Who would you say that either resonates most or would change most?
let's see. This is so funny. I'm thinking
Oh,
for gibbous, I can think of Pisces as being a little maybe not taking to that energy of right before the buildup. I can think of, I mean, it's easy. I don't want to overlay the chart, but I think of Virgo with that and thinking of how that would be easy. I also love the Leo moon in that phase because I can see that moving forward um, into something satisfying, right? Building up
absolutely.
into something public,
Well, and I
perhaps.
think that's the thing that I love so much about laying the story of the phase over top of the sign is
Yeah.
that you see a much fuller picture. And
Yes.
also where, so Jonathan is saying he's got a Pisces moon and he's born in the first quarter. Hilarious that we were literally
We
just
were
talking about
just
that.
like, does that resonate for you? The building,
Right? Yeah, for sure. But there's a potential. I don't know that it happens every time, but there's a potential that you can glean the gifts of the phase that you don't wouldn't naturally get from the sign, you know?
yeah,
And so when I think about gibbous, I think of again the fixed signs because and I went
there.
straight to Leo as well, like you
Yeah,
said, but because the with the gibbous phase, there's that there seems to be this energy where it's like constantly needing to create and move forward and adjust and create and move forward and adjust and like that kind of an
yeah,
energy. And so it's a extremely productive moon
yes,
phase to be born in.
yeah,
But again, challenging with the needing to refine and to change and adjust is going to be challenging for the fixed
yeah,
signs for sure, right?
yeah,
And it's a really visible phase. So let's say that maybe Scorpio might be
yeah,
the one that is the most altered in a gibbous
yes,
phase because
that
now
makes
it's
sense.
visible and it can't stay too fixed. And
Right,
so, right,
right.
that there would be a very different energy in Scorpio. Also in new, because I've met some very bright and energetic and adventurous double Scorpios, but they're new moon Scorpios. So
Fascinating.
gibbous, I think, would definitely give a Scorpio moon different energy for sure.
Yeah,
I think it
absolutely.
actually is very helpful for a Leo moon.
Oh,
Be-
well, I could see it. I mean, if you would, if you want that build up to public, it's a great assist, 100%. And I say public, but I just think about the function of Leo being to be warm, to be seen, and to be applauded, you know?
it's interesting because one of the things that I say about Leo in general, when people say they don't feel that seen, that attention piece of Leo, I like to shift it and say you need to have something you're proud of.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
so to have something that you're proud of, there
Hmm.
has to be other people at some
True.
point, right?
You
And
know,
it could just
yeah.
be a partner, it could be friends, it doesn't matter, but there is that sense of pride that a
Oh,
Leo
that's so
needs to have.
beautiful.
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
thank
it's
you.
interesting because I think I was reading a Goethe quote, and I can't remember the quote, but the nature of it is when you are living your purpose, it is what other people feel that will determine if you've accomplished it. And that sense
Oh,
that when you are living your full purpose, there will be pleasure from other people. They will give you that feedback. And that it happens in other people is kind of a conundrum, right? That
mhm.
something in you can bring that out without it, and I really have to say it, without it being people pleasing or limiting yourself or not being who you are.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so the full moon, we've only
yes,
got 5 minutes left. So full
yeah,
moon,
yeah,
um, to me is going to be most challenging for most challenging, potentially helpful for mutable signs, the objectivity, or maybe water signs. Sometimes it can be,
and best for Cancer. I apologize, I can't see any chat.
I'm just gonna,
Jonathan.
Jonathan just posted taking in people's emotions with my Pisces moon, transform it with Scorpio sun, and manifest it with my Capricorn rising conjunction my north node. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. That absolutely, that whole thing that he described to me speaks to the moon phase,
a
right?
hundred percent.
Taking all of those things and then turning it into something. That's a very first quarter moon phase. I love it. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, to me, tell me if you agree or not. If we're to go down the other side, um, it's going to be similar to what we talked about with the waxing phase. Um, the
Yes.
difference being the looking back versus the reaching forward towards, you know,
Yes. And
accomplishment.
I agree. And then I would add the layer of, we have fruit, we have tomatoes that are not ripe, they're all green. And we have flowers, and some of them have past their time of glory. And so, as a gardener, I have to go in and cut away some things. And when the peonies came and went so fast, my heart kind of, leapt out of my chest. And so, I want to say the waning period includes that. And so being prepared for that and putting out your things that are ready to go is a good idea. It's a fine thing to do, and it's not unnatural. And, the universe isn't trying to hurt your feelings by taking things away. There are things that will go that we weren't prepared to go. So I always think about a little more rest, after the disseminating. I said before, the shooting babies out of t-shirt cannons. Doosh, 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 doosh. You're sharing your information. I know we didn't talk about the best and the worst signs for that, but I would go ahead and say, let's see, doesn't want to show a Taurus in the disseminating phase, Taurus moon.
Ooh. So I'm going to say that so challenging for other people, not the person who has it,
Got it?
is a Sagittarius moon in the disseminating, because one of the things about disseminating is that taking in information and then sharing it from perhaps a soapbox. And so the common, I mean, there's a whole other chart and a lot of other things at play. So please, I'm not,
Oh, I have a
um,
Sagittarius sun. I back this 100%.
well, and I have lots of Sag,
Right. Of
you know,
course. We're
um,
verified.
so
Sag approved.
but I mean, it could be either an absolute gift to a Sag moon who wants to take all of its opinions of the world and get up there and share them. It could be a gift. Or if the rest of the chart does not support that being helpful, it could be problematic for sure
Exactly.
with that
That's
disseminating moon
exactly.
phase. That's cool. And then the closing square, the one of the things that I find fascinating, and so the it's described as the black sheep
That's right.
relationship between, so right, tight family, but they're the ones that stick out. And I had a client who had it was a gift, so it was just sort of out of curiosity getting a session. And so we talked about the moon phase last quarter, described the taking what the family gave, right? And then, so let's say it was a farm, and but then doing it in a new way,
Oh, I love
right?
that. I
And
love that.
so this young man had taken over the family business and totally upgraded it, updated it,
I love that.
revolutionized it. I mean, it was so literal. I love it so much when it's that literal.
Well, and
Um,
and my phrase for that is for the last quarter is you think you're getting a ticker tape parade, but really you're breaking everything down for inventory. And if you can just kind of catch that vibe, like, what?
yeah,
There's a sense of, you know, I'm not getting enough credit for what I've done.
right. Yeah. And then there's the balsamic.
Yeah.
Um, so the balsamic moon, one of the things that's interesting about the balsamic moon needs some time alone. There's a very 12th housey vibe
Hmm.
to the balsamic energy. And so there's definitely this need to be meditative in whatever that looks like, right?
Right.
And so a Leo moon, the fire, I'm going to say fire. It's
I
an
would agree with you.
elemental.
I would
Yeah.
agree with you.
Could be altered or challenged by the balsamic phase for sure.
Yes.
There's definitely a wisdom that comes with that phase, or potentially, right? It's dark, of course. I love the primitive idea of in the old days when there was no electricity and the dark moon, you had to rely on your instincts and your intuition.
Yes.
So that
Yes.
is a hallmark of those
How
moon
about
phases.
Aquarius moon in that 12th house? A little detached. Maybe that's a challenge.
Yeah, I like it. I
Yeah,
like it for sure. Well, and you would see with a Aquarius moon in balsamic, somebody who needs to learn the difference between their intellect and their intuition,
exactly.
right? Because,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah. Well,
That's
this
what it
was
is.
so I could talk about moon phases forever.
I know, I
Um,
know. I was
so
trying to
in
think of another like moon mansions. Who could we have on? There's so many things, but it's not just a moon show.
Yeah, it's not just a moon show. Well, thank you for being here, Yonatan, and thanks, Lillian. I will when we put this up, I'll put the article that I wrote in the comments if
Please.
anybody's interested in reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about next Friday?
Let's talk about the Neptune Saturn conjunction. Wait, did we do that already?
We did that already.
We did that already. Hmm.
Oh, we can talk about the upcoming full moon. And
Let's talk about the
it will have
upcoming.
passed, but you know why? Because it's the first lunation that we're having with all of the outers and their new sign.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love
let's talk about that. All
it. Yeah,
right.
and
So
we
we'll
can
see
touch on
everybody
the
next week.
retrogrades. We
We'll
can
talk
touch on
about retrogrades. We have
yeah,
retrogrades coming. So yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Let's do
All
it.
right.
All right.
How fun. Thank
Mwah.
you, Yonatan. Have a
Thank
great
you for
week.
being awesome.
Thank you, Tracy. Love
I'm gonna
you.
stop. I love you too. I don't know how to stop.
I know, right? When do we hit stop?
I think I stopped. Did I
That was
stop?
so much fun. That was so much fun.
Can we stop this and come back in?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going to go to the bathroom. So it might be a
Okay. I'll
minute.
see you in a minute.
Okay. Okay.